As most of you know, I'm a big espouser of the quality of life that we have in this community. I think all of us are very proud of that fact. But you know, occasionally we need to recognize those people that have grown up here and have been very successful. I don't think we do that very much. I'm talking about us townies. For instance, I happen to know that, a few years ago, it was a family business, a very successful business here in Ann Arbor. All the principals were from this area, and they were very successful. And Bill, you'd be interested to know, it was a store that sold office supplies and office furniture. That being said, we also have another person here with us today who has distinguished herself as an Ann Arbor native. Zoe Clark is a graduate of the University of Michigan, but I think she's more proud of the Open School.
Absolutely.
Oh, gosh. She is with Michigan Radio. Probably many of you listen to Michigan Radio. And she's the program director and oversees the programming on the state's largest public radio station. And she also hosts with Michigan Public Radio Network Lansing Bureau Chief Rick Pluta, who is with us today. It's Just Politics, a weekly look at Michigan politics that airs Monday mornings on the Morning Edition. She began her collegiate studies at George Washington University in our nation's capital. She does hold degrees in communication studies and political science from the University of Michigan. And most importantly, she lives in Ann Arbor, where she was born and raised. Let's welcome her with a Kiwanis salute. Zoe Clark.
Okay, so first off, a lot of law and legal jokes. So as a family, a legal family, I just have to tell this story. My grandpa was a lawyer in Flint in Ann Arbor for a gazillion years, Norm Gottlieb, and my grandma got so tired of all the law jokes that she finally made shirts that were from Shakespeare or Shakespeare's Henry VI that said the quote, "But first we kiss all the lawyers instead of first we kill all the lawyers." And I think we need to get all those shirts for folks here. Enough with the lawyer jokes, gosh. And also making me come up after Happy Dollars. That's about the best thing I've ever witnessed. I'm going to start doing that at Michigan Radio because I don't know if you, Rick's nodding, that's not a good idea. After news, like over the past few years, I want as many happy thoughts as possible and Happy Dollars. I like after our news meetings where everyone is just ready to just go like in their corner and cry or eat a pint of ice cream. I love the idea of Happy Dollars. Maybe we'll have to do that, except instead we'll bring happy stories or something like that. So Dale invited me, and I am so excited to talk about politics. I'm always happy to talk about politics, but I also was mentored by Jack Lessenberry, who some of you know, who said no one really wants to hear you talk. They want to have you answer their questions. So I'll talk for a few minutes about things that I think are super interesting come election 2018, but then I would love to open it up and hear what your thoughts are and your questions. Also, because it's kind of selfish of me, because I get really good story ideas that way that then I can pass back to our newsroom. I'm also happy because folks here are from Ann Arbor. If you have questions about Michigan radio or public radio in general, I'm more than happy to answer those. I started at Michigan Radio as a little baby intern a million years ago, and now I'm running the station. So I like to say I've worn every hat, literally, and worn every microphone and lav mic, literally. So I'm happy to answer questions about that too. So I'll talk for just a few minutes about the things that Rick Pluta, who is in the back, who is here with me today, and I constantly talk about, and that is, of course, election 2018, although we're always talking about whatever the next election is, because the next election is always the most important, groundbreaking election and the one that's going to change everything. And then the morning after November, whatever, we wake up and we look to the next, 365 days or whatever it is to the next one. So the big three things that I think we are all looking at before 2018 is the year of the woman. And I don't just say that because I am a woman and I see many women in this room nodding their heads admits to that. But that is in a post-Trump era. We have seen more women throw their hat in to run than ever before here in Michigan. I was talking to a state rep, a woman who happens to also be one of the state reps that's running the re-election efforts for the Michigan State House, who says we have never had this many women, over 100. Okay, 100 women in the primary running. This is for chambers, Senate and House, 148 seats in total, more than 100 women running. And we're seeing that. Thank you for applauding too, sir. Thank you, appreciate that. No, he knows who's making dinner tonight, right? Because we can do both. So we also saw that over the past few weeks. We saw a young woman, in fact, in New York, beat a 15-year incumbent, a democratic socialist, she calls herself. So that is what we call in the radio business a forward promote, which is so the next thing to look at, and that is a so-called blue wave. Most politicos, you don't have to get paid a lot of money to be able to tell you that the election, after a president gets elected for the first time, not very nice to the party in power. This happened in 2006, this happened in 2010 with the rise of the Tea Party, and particularly the president's first term, which Donald Trump is still in. We are still in the first term. And so what that looks like is Democrats are going to win some seats. We don't know how many. After 2016, everyone in my field basically decided we're not making predictions anymore. Of course, we still make predictions. We can't not make predictions. But we were like, let's tame it down a little bit. But one thing that's likely to note is Democrats will win seats. And that doesn't have much to do with anything that has to do necessarily with Donald Trump, although it may certainly be part of it. But it has to do with the party in power. After they win the first time in the White House, the other party tends to do better, whether it's fickle voters or people like to think that we're independents and so they swing vote. That's just how it works. Here in Michigan in particular, though, in a midterm election, Democrats tend to stay home in Michigan in off-year elections, off-year meaning non-presidential year elections, which of course this is. There are more registered Democrats in Michigan than Republicans. That's not debatable, that is just a fact. But Democrats don't turn out in the waves that Republicans do in midterm elections, which in Michigan is when our governor is reelected or elected, Secretary of State, Attorney General, the entire State House, the entire State Senate, and then of course our entire congressional delegation. So, is Michigan a red state now? We used to think of it sort of as a blue state, went towards Democratic presidential candidates 6 cycles. Donald Trump won for the first time in that many cycles as a Republican. Is Michigan a red state? A lot of political watchers will be watching what 2018 portends for whether Michigan stays as sort of that Rust Belt industrial blue state or starts looking a little more like an Ohio. Same kind of economic background, but starts looking at least a little more red. I was going to say pink, but now with like pink and communists and Russia, I feel like I got to stay away. I just got to say red. The other thing to keep an eye out is October surprises, right? And that can run anything from a hurricane like Hurricane Sandy that many think helped likely President Obama win re-election. I think most folks, when you look at the numbers, saw that he was likely going to win anyway, but it did not hurt to see him acting presidential. And then, of course, getting a hug from a Republican governor, Chris Christie, and showing that sort of in times of crisis, presidents and politicians can step up and work together. Again, not making predictions, but who could even imagine what could happen come October because of everything that has happened so far? I'm certainly not going to guess, but it could be something weather related. It could be something that has to do with a military strike. So these are things that we also watch in October, although again, as I said, it feels like every single day is an October surprise over the past few years. Some big things to watch because we are now exactly 30 days away from Michigan's primary. And here in Michigan, because of how many of the districts, maybe you've heard about the redistricting proposal, or some folks like to call it gerrymandering, but because of that, a ton of races are actually going to be determined on August 7th rather than in November. that whichever Republican or Democrat wins, because of how the voters are drawn into these districts, that person is likely going to win. Debbie Dingell, who is the congresswoman of this district here, or is Tim Walberg at this line? Actually, we're so far west. I have to look if is it Walberg or is it it's Dingell? Yeah, okay, but the line is like really, really close. But so it's this kind of thing, right, that if Debbie Dingell was primaried, which she's not this year, but if she was, whoever won that race on October 7th, that's going to be your next congressperson in November. So one of the things that we're really paying attention to, of course, is the gubernatorial race. Democrats already determined their attorney general, their secretary of state, but we're keeping an eye on the Republican side for attorney general. That's also coming up. But one of the really big races that I think has gotten very, very little attention is that we actually have a sitting senator that's up for re-election. Hands for how many people realize that Debbie Stabenow was actually up for re-election again. Well, this is the kind of room that these are the people I want to party with. I'm so glad to see so many hands, because usually I say that and folks are like, oh, really? So she's running. She doesn't have any primary candidates that look like anything. There might be some write-ins and things like that. There are 2 Republicans that are running against Debbie Stabenow. They had a debate last week. Some of you may watch public television's Off the Record program. Tim Skubick had Sandy Pensler, and he had John James, 2 of the candidates. So one of them will be running against Debbie Stabenow, and one of the things that I've been saying is Republicans could care less about that race. Now, of course, that's a little flip to say. It's a little hyperbolic, but here's the dirty little secret about Debbie Stabenow. Republicans don't really hate her. She's kind of down the middle of the road. She does a lot for agriculture, which of course in Michigan is our 2nd largest industry. Now, don't get me wrong, if they got to decide and put a check mark and it was as easy as that, they would absolutely choose a Republican. But the fact is they work well with Debbie Stabenow, and there's a lot of money that is going into some open congressional seats in Michigan. And so what we're seeing right now is a race right now in the primary Republicans who are going to run against her. But watch and see how much money that's actually poured in come September and October, outside money, to try to keep Republicans to keep the U.S. Senate. That's going to be something absolutely to watch. Or it might just be a sleeper because Debbie Stabenow knows how to run. She is a hardcore campaigner, and she has a war chest. So she's situated really, really well. There's 3 congressional open seats, which is kind of crazy, and it's just this continuation of losing clout in Congress from Michigan. Sander Levin is retiring, as many of you know. John Conyers resigned earlier in the year, as well as Dave Camp from a few years ago. John Dingell, Debbie's husband, stepped down. Rick and I actually did the math, which is incredible because journalists trying to do math is never a good idea. But it was something like 200 combined, I think it was like 193 combined years of service that Michigan has lost within the past decade. And maybe we think, oh, it's just Congress, folks, but that matters when you're talking about things like the SULACs, like the Ambassador Bridge, like the Farm Bill. Michigan also used to have John Dingell and John Conyers, who they were the chairman of powerful, powerful committees. That is no longer. In fact, after Fred Upton, Tim Walberg is the most senior Republican congressman. I remember as a little baby intern covering his first congressional race. That makes me even sad, not about his ability by any means, but about the longevity and seniority of our Congress folks. When someone like me can say, oh, I remember his first congressional election. My interns are even like, oh, that's not right. That's not okay. As I said before, the entire state house, the entire state senate, so that's 148 seats are up for election. I think most good money, if you're betting, or happy dollars, maybe you want to grab them back to bet and then see if you can double your money and put them back into the happy dollars, is that the state senate will stay Republican. That's even if there's a huge blue wave turnout. Again, that's just because of how Michigan's maps are drawn, that there are just more Republicans Republican senators. In fact, Jack Lessenberry used to have a joke that the Michigan senatorial delegation can all fit in one large van and fed with one large pizza. That's true, depending on like how big, like an NYPD pizza is huge. Absolutely, that could feed 11 people. But the House of Reps, the State House of Reps, is absolutely what to watch, particularly if Michigan does go for another Republican governor or goes for a Democratic governor, but the Senate stays Republican. We are going to see, I don't want to use the word chaos, but for folks who are keeping an eye on Michigan politics, whether you like what's happening or not, things have been pretty smooth sailing. Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the chief executive, the governor's office. And what we're looking to in 2018 is the possibility that we may go back to sort of the Granholm years, where the Senate was Republican, House was Democrats, and then we'll have to see what happens with the gubernatorial race, which of course for us political journalists makes us so excited, except for the late nights, because for folks who remember the Granholm years, there were budget shutdowns, 2 of them, and Rick Pluto was there very, very late, and then very, very early in the morning covering those. Finally, the last 2 things I want folks to keep an eye out, which I find fascinating, are the ballot initiatives. So some of you, whether you want to raise your hand or not about whether you signed them, but how many folks were asked to sign the redistricting ballot? They were everywhere. I mean, they were even at rest stops on Memorial Day, right? Everywhere. They are blanketing the state, and it is absolutely incredible. Again, whether you are for or against what they want to do, which is creating an independent commission to redraw those districts that I was talking about earlier, whether you agree that they should be or not, the ability for a grassroots organization, run again by a 28-year-old woman, to get almost 500,000 folks to sign these ballot initiatives is bonkers. The only group that has ever come close to that, and it is a well-organized political machine, is Right to Life. That is the only one. Others, they pay those folks who are out in the streets usually $1, $2 a signature. Marijuana legalization, that's on the ballot. It's going to be on the ballot in 2018, something if you're voting, you'll vote for or against. Those folks who are getting signatures, $1 or $2 per signature they gathered. The redistricting, voters not politicians is what they're called, grassroots completely, which I think goes back to that, well, what are we looking at 2018? Well, grassroots, right? And what does all of this portend for 2018? And that's going to be really fascinating to watch. So I think I've gone over like my self-imposed 10 minutes, so I want to open it up. I want to open it up to questions, and maybe just raise your hand.
We have time for a few questions.
Great, and just maybe say your name, just so I know who you are. Hi.
With regard to redistricting,
Yeah.
what will keep them independent if it's only politicians who are interested in politics?
So do you mean the independent commission?
Yeah, how independent is an independent commission have to be when it's the politicians who are interested in politics?
Well, so that's a great question, but one thing is, and maybe this is a little bit of a misnomer, which in politics is totally fair, but actually how this independent commission really just means it's independent from the legislature. Because right now it's lawmakers that draw the lines. And so this is, say it again? Lawyers? Did someone yell lawyers? Again with the lawyers, you guys. This independent commission will still be made up of Republicans and Democrats. It just won't be made up of lawmakers. I deeply believe that there are plenty of people, though, out there. Look at this room. There's a few elected officials in this room, but most folks here are not. And you're here listening to me talk about politics. So I think there's plenty of people who are involved politically who are independent of the system. That doesn't mean we're all going to be the ones that are nominated to draw the maps, though. But I absolutely think that it can be independent aside from the legislature and still call it independent.
Dan Burrows.
Hi, Dan.
I just wondered what your perspective is on what I think is probably the most interesting race, and that's the Brian Kelly-Bill Schuette race.
Yeah.
Just to see what your perspective is and how it's going to turn out.
I have the latest numbers. The latest gubernatorial poll came out a week ago Friday, and that had Attorney General, Republican Bill Schuette at 45, and it had Lieutenant Governor Brian Kelly at 16.
Yeah, really.
And so there's some big like, ooh, shocks, but actually that's pretty consistent with what the polling has looked like all year. And I come from a political science background because I went to U of M for social studies, but so I really love the idea of looking at trends, right, rather than just one poll. So we can all go, ooh, and you want to go, well, is Cali increasing that number? Is it decreasing? What is it looking like? And it's very, very steady, which again, so I would say if the election was held, let's say the primary, instead of 30 days tomorrow, it pretty much looks like it's Bill Schuette's to lose, right? Particularly because of what the trend is looking like. Now, interestingly enough, and I'm gonna just go down a rabbit hole a little bit just to look at the Democratic side, because I wrote those numbers down too. Gretchen Whitmer is at 40 points. Shri Thanedar is at 19. And last month, or about 6 weeks ago now, they were almost neck and neck. And now Gretchen Whitmer has doubled a point. So again, that's a trend that I'm looking at and going, okay, this is basically what Gretchen Whitmer's campaign has been saying, which was by end of June, early July, we'll wrap up the endorsements, we'll start covering Detroit where Gretchen Whitmer really needs votes, right? That's one of the main reasons that Hillary Clinton did not win Michigan, because of the turnout in the city of Detroit. And so now that Mayor Mike Duggan is spending like an hour or two a week with Gretchen Whitmer in Detroit, the numbers are starting to go up. But if you actually look at the crosstabs, Abdul El Sayed is at 31 in the city of Detroit. Shri Thanedar is at 26%. Again, this is just in the city. And Whitmer, 23. So again, for her, the trend is going up, right, for August. But again, it's all about get out the vote. GOTV is what we call it, get out the vote. And the city of Detroit, yet again, is going to be huge, huge for Democrats. So look also to see who her candidate for LG is, right? And whether it's someone from the city who can help also try to get turnout and excite Detroit voters who really don't know Gretchen Whitmer that well. She's from Lansing. She's never run a statewide campaign before. Unlike Schuette, unlike Cali, who have that name ID because they've been statewide on the ballot. Folks have seen that name before. Whereas Gretchen Whitmer, kind of a Lansing animal, unless you are super into politics and remember her as the Senate minority leader and sort of constantly fighting against Governor Snyder in his early years before she was term limited.
Larry French.
Hi, Larry.
I subscribe to an economic consulting firm in Montreal called DCA.
Okay.
And one of their recent long-term forecasts is that they said the United States would swing to the left. They also say in 20, 25 years, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid will absorb 100% of the federal government's cash revenue.
Mm-hmm. Well, other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? Yeah. And this is why folks are so disgruntled. I mean, whether you like the policies or not, there is a reason why Bernie Sanders won Michigan in the Democratic primary and why Donald Trump won as president in Michigan. Folks are frustrated. The average voter doesn't like what's going on in DC. And so they vote the bums out or someone that is not a career politician. And they keep trying to do that, and yet some folks remain, and so we keep seeing some of these issues that you're talking about continue. Now, I am an optimist, so I'd like to believe that we are going to get our economy sorted out. I also would like to believe that climate change is going to get better, and we're all going to be able to eat as much chocolate ice cream as we want and not have to exercise. So I get I'm a little Pollyanna-ish, but the facts that you say are absolutely true.
Don Cossack.
Hi, Don.
Actually, I have a couple of questions if it doesn't take too long.
Okay.
First one, what are your theories about women now being as organized and active as they are in the elections? And number two, could you speak to the Supreme Court justices in the state of Michigan, those candidates, please?
Oh, sure. So I thought you were going to ask about Joan Larson. So as a possibility on Donald Trump's list for Supreme Court nominees. There is a Michigander right now that we are looking at, Raymond Kaithledge. And of course we know prime time tonight because we are all living in a Democratic reality show that tonight at 9, on a TV close to you, we are going to find out who our possible new Supreme Court justices, or at least who will be Donald Trump would like to see. We'll see if the Senate confirms whoever that candidate is. Oh, ask me the first one again. I'm horrible with double-barreled questions.
Your theories of why women are so organized and active.
God, I wish there was some really easy way to explain. I mean, I think it's everything from the Me Too movement. I think you have a president that, whether you agree with policies or not, says it like it is, which, as he himself says, is locker room talk, which can offend folks. And I don't want to just say can offend women. It can offend a lot of people who believe, well, I'm going to go into a locker room and I don't talk that way. I think there's also something about women in the work. So for example, I started at Michigan Radio, an amazing, amazing place to work at. I work at a place that is majority female. My boss for many, many years was an incredible woman. I'm now the boss. I'm a young woman. For me, it's very hard for me to often speak to that sense of not feeling empowered. But I think there is a feeling, I mean, again, this is right, getting to live in Ann Arbor, 36 square miles surrounded by reality. But I'm very hyper aware of the fact that that is not how it is everywhere. And that you do sometimes have to walk backwards in pearls and, you know, high heels and do all those kind of things. And I think it is a moment where, for many women, Hillary Clinton was seen as sort of a standard bearer for female power. And when she lost to someone that many say is derogatory to women, I mean, let's remember the march with the big pink hats that women were wearing. Some in this room might have gone to ones in Lansing or Ann Arbor or DC. And again, I think that also is in line with the Me Too movement. I also don't think it's that surprising that women organize. I just think we're paying more attention to it. I know I'm pretty organized. My mom taught me that, my aunts, I'm not shocked women are organizing and saying what they want. I'm shocked people maybe are paying attention to it. Hello, Art.
Art Volo here. I'm a radio guy. So
You are?
I want to ask a radio question.
Sure.
I mean, everybody's asking politics.
Yeah.
We're almost burned out on politics, but it's okay.
Speak for yourself.
I've seen the ratings. WUOM, which is Michigan Radio here in Ann Arbor, 81.7.
That's correct. MichiganRadio.org. You're doing the advertisement for me. Thank you, Art.
You haven't said the frequency. Some people might not know. Anyway, I'd like to know, WDET is the public station for Detroit at Wayne State. You guys have higher ratings in Detroit than the Detroit station has.
Art, can I hire you to just come and market for me?
So how do you do it, other than the fact that you've got good programming? Is there a secret sauce? How did you do it? I mean, that's phenomenal. I don't know any place in the country where a suburban station, so to speak, does better than the station in the city.
Well, thank you. And those ratings are correct. We have amazing listeners. I actually grew up listening to WDET because when I was growing up, Michigan Radio was the classical station. I listened to that with my grandparents, but at home, my parents listened to WDET, and I'm a total fangirl of Ann DeLisi, who does music on the weekends at DET. So DET was pretty much an all-music station. And then a few years after Michigan Radio went to all news from classical, DET kind of started to follow in the footsteps. And I think, one, folks missed the music. Me included. And now they're starting to bring the music back. And I don't want to say it's an identity crisis by any means, but I think listeners are trying to figure out, well, what is WDET now? Is it a news and public affairs program like Stephen Henderson, who does a fabulous show, Detroit Today, 9 o'clock in the morning? Everyone should listen to it. Again, see, we all love each other. But I think there's a sense of, well, is it a music station? Because on the weekends it's music, but during the day there's news. And we've been very consistent all along. And so my guess is it's some of that. But I'm grateful for all the folks and we also cover Detroit, right? We have an amazing reporter, Sarah Swick, who's there all the time. Sarah Hewlett is our enterprise editor. She lives in the city. We have a few other folks who are in the city, live in the city, report on the city. So we are certainly not an Ann Arbor station going like, oh, what's happening over in that bigger city? I mean, we have folks on the ground with sources who I think report on it incredibly, as does DET though, absolutely. And we do a lot of work work together these days, which I'm really grateful for, because there's fabulous folks over there as well.
So we have time for one more question.
Okay, let's make it a good one.
Since this is the year of the woman, the woman has the last question.
Love it.
Current area has the largest Arabic population outside of the Middle East.
Yeah.
It also has an extremely large Indian population, which may contribute to both El Said and Tinabar's numbers. My question to you is, what are your projections in terms of how will this play in the western part of the state, the Grand Rapids part of the state, where they tend to vote a great deal? We have, geographically, we have Whitmer, who has Lansing. We have Tinabar and El Said, who have the Detroit area. How does this merge in the western part of the state, which may impact a great deal on the rest of us?
So that's a fabulous question. Overall, there are fewer Democrats on the west side of the state, right? My gut says, though, because it's an easy TV market, Lansing and Grand Rapids, that Gretchen Whitmer will just likely do better there. She's also spent quite a bit of time there. She has folks who are working for her up and down places like Grand Rapids, even Traverse City, right, across the state. I think for Republicans, the west side of the state is definitely more interesting, simply because Callie is from more far west. Schuette is a Midland guy, and so and then you have Patrick Colbeck, who has sort of the very conservative, more of the, I would say, the Donald Trump voters, even though Donald Trump has endorsed Schuette, which Schuette will tell you, if you haven't heard that from Schuette yet, I'm shocked if I'm the first to tell you that, because anywhere Schuette goes, he will tell you that Donald Trump endorsed him. So it's a great question. I don't think West Michigan will have as huge of a deal for Democrats as Detroit will. That Detroit and the voters in Detroit are make or break for Gretchen Whitmer. Again, we saw this movie with Hillary Clinton, and if folks are not excited and they don't turn out on August 7th, it could very well be not Gretchen Whitmer's. But if we see a lot of folks in West Michigan, it may balance out. And again, this all comes down to who turns out to vote on August 7th, right? And then in November.
Thank you so much, Zoe.
Thank you for having me.